We're here at the 2017 Cleveland Asian Festival. I'm here at the booth of the Vietnamese Cultural Garden and the Friendship Foundation with Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Meisner. And Joe, you served in Vietnam. Tell us about your experiences there.
In Vietnam?
Yeah. You go back.
Well, in 1968, the Army gave me a free airline ticket to Vietnam. And I was very fortunate over there. I served with perhaps the finest group of soldiers in the world, Special Forces. And I got to meet a lot of Vietnamese people and really fell in love with the country. So when I came back in 1975, I helped with the resettlement of refugees here in northern Ohio and in Cleveland. And out of that grew a relationship with the Vietnamese community. And eventually we had the establishment of the Friendship Foundation. Miss Yao Ryan had been here in Cleveland since '71. And she helped with the resettlement, of course. And then she set up the Friendship Foundation. And it's out of that foundation has grown the movement for the cultural gardens. Of course, the foundation does a lot of charitable work here in the U.S. and also in Vietnam. But let's take the Vietnamese cultural gardens. This will join the gardens that are now on Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. There are about 30 of them there already, and there's about 8 to 10 new ones. And the Vietnamese will also be one of those new ones. And that garden will celebrate the founding of the Vietnamese people about 4,000 years ago. And that founding was started by the Dragon King from the mountains, met up with the beautiful princess from the sea. And they fell in love and, of course, got married, and they only had 100 children. And the story is that each child came out of an egg. And those 100 children had 50 boys and 50 girls, and that was the start of the Vietnamese people. So the garden will celebrate that. Vietnam is also a country that had the Trung Sisters. These were the young women whose husbands had been killed by their oppressing race of people that were running Vietnam. And the Vietnamese people revolted, and the Trung Sisters led that revolt. And that was 2,000 years ago. So anyway, the gardens will also celebrate women. And in the center of the garden will be a huge, beautiful statue of a woman symbolizing mothers and sisters and girlfriends and wives, and of course back to the Trung Sisters, who were the two women. By the way, they've been trained in the military. You mentioned the military before, but somehow their father had gotten them trained in the military. So when they started the rebellion and revolution back then, they knew how to lead the soldiers into battle. And one of the most famous speeches is given by one of the women on the banks of the river when she talks to her 30,000 soldiers and said, "We are here to seek justice," because their husbands have been killed, and also to seek a place for our people in the world.
Well, let me ask you about the military, because it seems maybe odd to someone who wasn't there. You fought there and had undoubtedly some terrible experiences in Vietnam, and a lot of U.S. veterans have gone back to Vietnam, and it seems like a lot of Vietnamese have come here, and there seems to be a great relationship, which doesn't make sense to someone who wasn't there, who you had such a tough war. You fought a war there, but you loved the country and the people.
Well, there are 58,000 American soldiers who gave their lives for the country of Vietnam, for freedom there. And there are 300,000 Vietnamese soldiers who gave their lives for the South to be free. And there are 600,000 soldiers from the North who gave their lives for their side. So there's an awful lot of blood spilled. And it's very peculiar. Sometimes out of battles come friendships. For example, the last time I was in Vietnam 2 months ago, we were going through one of the cemeteries at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And we're going through the cemetery and talking English, and up comes a man that introduces himself and says he's the vice director of the cemetery, and he was an interpreter during the war, interpreting English and Vietnamese. And I kind of wondered, well, what's he doing here at this garden cemetery for communist soldiers? So I asked him, I said, well, you fought in the war? He said, yes. I said, well, where? He said, well, in Saigon. I said, well, what year were you in Saigon? He says, 1968. And I said, you were interpreting there? He says, yes. I said, who were the soldiers you were with? He said, well, of course, I was with the North Vietnamese Army. So he was a North Vietnamese interpreter. And then he said, I see you don't walk very well. And I said, well, I'm trying. He said, well, here, I've got a present for you. And he handed me this cane, beautifully carved out of bamboo. And he said the cane also could be used to predict how long I would live. And so he did some kind of operation with his fingers on the knobs of the cane, and then he finally said, "Well, you're going to live to 89." And I said, "Well, I'm not far from that now. I'm not sure that's really very helpful." But anyway, my point is this: the war, at least the active side of the war, right now has ended there. And the Vietnamese people, by the way, suffered a terrible war in 1979. They were attacked by the Chinese, and there were 50,000 Vietnamese who died. And a lot of Chinese may have died too. I don't know the exact number. My point is that Vietnam really does want to have other countries in the world that they can call upon. And I think America is one of them. And they asked us for weapons, by the way. They recently wanted to make a weapons deal.
Okay, so now we'll be celebrating the Vietnamese people, the Vietnamese culture through this new Vietnamese cultural garden, joining the chain of cultural gardens here in Cleveland. And let's talk to Miss Yawo Ryan, who's the matriarch of the community here.
That's a good word.
Miss Ryan is the matriarch of the Vietnamese community here. You came here in 1971, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I came here in 1971.
And you since brought so many people over back from Vietnam, and you've made many trips back to help people.
Yes, I've been back to Vietnam since 1993. About over 40 trips already. I have a charity called Friendship Foundation, American and Vietnamese. We do a lot of work there. We put maybe 1 million children to the school, and we build school and so on and so forth. And here in Cleveland, you want to know what we do in Cleveland?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, we do a lot of work around here, but then one of the most wonderful thing that we do here is a Vietnamese culture garden on Martin Luther King Boulevard. And I've been solicited for trying to get the property to do culture garden almost 20 years. But I tell you, one a wonderful group of people helping me to get that property there in 2012, and that the team of brother and sister, they helped me to do this. And I tell you that today hopefully we're gonna have some background either at this end of the year or maybe sometime first part of the year next year.
Well, tell us here's a drawing of what the site plan might look like, and what's that main feature there in the middle? It's
in the middle, what you see in the middle here, there's a picture of a woman, a lady, and she's supposed to be portrait of Vietnamese woman, but actually that we like to call this she's a woman, but we like to say that a mother, and she mother not only the Vietnamese mother, but she's gonna be the mother of all of us, which is all nationality, that her children gonna be right in the middle of our Vietnamese culture garden.
So we're here today at the Cleveland Asian Festival with Ms. Yawo Ryan, representing the Vietnamese Cultural Garden. You can find more about that at the culturalgardens.org website, and we'll be looking for progress on the Vietnamese garden. It looks like a great design, and it's going to be a great addition to the garden. So thank you, Ms. Ryan.
You're welcome, Dan. Thank you.